bad breath. Or cyclodextrins are very well known to be used as dietary fibers, so they have a very positive effect on the microflora of humans and the digestion. They can also affect the absorption of certain food components, especially, of course, as you can imagine, the ones that can form inclusion complexes with cyclodextrins. So you can easily imagine that you swallow an anti-cyclodextrin, even if you swallow it empty, it will look for something that it can incorporate in a complex within your body, and that will be typically a fat molecule. So it could be a fatty acid or cholesterol or something like that. So it was shown to have a very positive effect on the on our lipid status and their absorption, and also the glycemic response. And these are clinically validated data, so I'm not just saying that, okay, this could be a nice product. No, there is clinical evidence that cyclodextrins can do that. Not all of them, but some cyclodextrins are possible to do that. So let's see a few products. What can we incorporate? Oh yeah, I saw that there is a question in the chat box. I forgot to tell in the very beginning that if you have any questions during the talk, just list them in the chat, and after I've stopped talking, we'll have time to address those questions. So whenever something is on your mind, just write it in the chat box and we'll go through each of them, hopefully, at the end of the presentation. So just a few examples of what kind of compounds we can put into cyclodextrin complexes and how would that improve their properties. Usually these will be improving solubility or stability, so improving bioavailability or so on. So a very typical example, coenzyme Q10. Here on this slide on figure A, you can see how much compared to the benchmark, which is the naked coenzyme Q10, cyclodextrin complex can improve the solubility of coenzyme Q10. And on the slide B, you can see how much cyclodextrin complex can improve the stability. So without the cyclodextrin, you can see how quickly the active degrades, whereas in a cyclodextrin complex, this is, of course, can be stabilized pretty much. Another example, very fashionable nowadays, so cannabidiol, which we know as a very insoluble compound, also as a very unstable compound. And there are now on the market certain gelatin capsules filled with hemp oil and complexed into cyclodextrin. A further advantage in the dietary field of cyclodextrins is that they are compatible with almost all kinds of dosage forms, so you can incorporate them very easily into tablets, into sachet powders, into gelatin capsules, into oral liquids, into syrups, chewing gum. So technically any kind of formulation. I cannot really think of any formulation where, from a technological perspective, a cyclodextrin complex will not be possible to add. Another compound is fatty acids. So, or in this case, in this particular case, lipoic acid, which is usually used in products for bodybuilding. But in general, fatty acids are very ideal gas molecules to be incorporated into cyclodextrin cavities, especially alpha cyclodextrin. And here you can see how much the bioavailability could be increased several folds simply by putting the active ingredient in the cavity of the cyclodextrin. So technically you can see that the shape of the curve is similar, but you can achieve a much higher absorption. Probably one of the most well-studied gas molecules with cyclodextrins is the curcumin, and I brought this slide from this data from Walker, who has a curcumin complex marketed. So this is a product that's available on the market as a cyclodextrin complex. That is not very common, by the way, but there are some gas molecules that are available as a complex. And here you can see that the gamma cyclodextrin complex enhances the absorption 40 times of the naked curcumin, and the bioavailability 18 times compared to the naked ingredient. Here I must maybe add, because I'm just bringing new and new guest molecules, that cyclodextrins are typically very flexible in their nature, so they are not really selective compounds, not very specific to certain guest molecules. So I would say that if you have a hydrophobic molecule that you want to add into, for instance, a dietary supplement or a cosmetic, one of the cyclodextrins will be probably working. I cannot really guarantee that you can achieve the target concentration, because that's of course not a given, how much the cyclodextrin will improve the properties of a given compound. But the fact that one of them will form a complex with your compound, that one I can guarantee. So some of them will work to some extent. Resveratrol also very fashionable, and we'll see that this is not only restricted to dietary supplements. So there are nutraceuticals as well as cosmetics where cyclodextrin based resveratrol is added into the solution, and similar to the figures we have seen before, we can see that compared to the almost no plasma resveratrol levels with a cyclodextrin complex, you can achieve a fairly long effect and a high bioavailability. You can, of course, also think about more complex systems. So it doesn't necessarily has to be a single component, and that's also often studied if cyclodextrin can be used to encapsulate, for instance, a composite material, or an essential oil, or a natural extract or something like that. And the results show that it's possible to do it. Of course, with systems of many components, what you will see is that cyclodextrins will interact differently with the components. So you cannot really expect all the components improved and the overall effect enhanced by the cyclodextrin. So with some components it will work better, and those will be remarkably improved. And this may not be the major component, I don't know. And with other components it will work less, or it will not have any effect at all. Also, fat-soluble vitamins are very typical targets for cyclodextrins. So vitamin D is something that I brought here in the dietary supplement field, but you'll see in the cosmetics that vitamin A and E are very typical targets too. So of course it's an ideal candidate. And on the right-hand side of the picture, I brought a pregnancy vitamin, which contains fish oil complex with cyclodextrin. So that's also an example for products with composite nature that can be encapsulated. If you think about taste masking of fish oil with cyclodextrins, it would be reasonable to think that, okay, this could be something very handy, that, okay, you can hit two birds with one stone, as you could improve the bioavailability or the solubility of the fish oil components, and also mask their taste. We have tried, and it's not super efficient in the taste masking. Of course, the bioavailability is good, but the taste masking is so. Okay, so these were just the examples of how you can bring improved, let's say improved guest molecules into the cyclodextrin complexes. So now I'm moving into a bit different applications. Packaging of foods, which is of course, okay, borderline, but still. So how cyclodextrins could be used here? And again, the two options recur again. One option is that what you want to deliver is a molecule that's, for instance, so for food packaging, it's very typical that you want to include a gas molecule. But adding a gas molecule is not easy from a technological perspective under a packaging, especially if you want, for instance, a controlled release. But into cyclodextrins, you can also encapsulate gases and isolate them as solid complexes. That's something that exists on the market, solid complexes of gas molecules. And that's something that you can put into the packaging of a food product. And you can also achieve a controlled release of the active molecule in this case. The other option is to add empty cyclodextrins as a powder or a sachet or whatever into the packaging to remove odors, for instance, from the unpleasant odors from the materials. Okay, so enough of the nutraceuticals, and let's move to the next topic, which will be foods. So here I will try to focus on specifically food applications. I've already explained that cyclodextrins can be used as dietary fibers. You can also imagine that they will alter the taste of foods if you incorporate, and that can be an improvement in some cases. They can improve the palatability, they can improve the shelf life of certain foods and products, or reduce their glycemic index. There was one recommendation that emerged recently and then many of these applications are related to alpha cyclodextrin. And in this recommendation, they said that to each 50 grams of starch that you consume, it's advised to consume around 50 grams of alpha cyclodextrin to reduce the postprandial glycemic response. I've never tried, but makes sense scientifically. So just a few products, some of them are not very new. So cyclodextrins can be used to remove certain components of foods that are unwanted. For instance, there are quite a few products where cyclodextrins are used to remove cholesterol from butter, from eggs and stuff like that. And in these cases, what is done is that during the process of preparation, cyclodextrin is added, which forms an insoluble complex with cholesterol that can be separated from the other components of the food, and thereby the cholesterol is removed. The cyclodextrin is not part accordingly of the final formulation either, and you get a cholesterol-free food. Or it can be used to replace certain components or additives during uh, food preparations. For instance, in baking, you can replace egg with cyclodextrins because alpha cyclodextrin can be used very nicely to create stable emulsions even at high temperatures. And I've tried some of these foods, so some cakes that were made with cyclodextrin, some toppings, ice creams, and they're not bad. Okay, so I guess we have all tried these kind of foods which are not the traditional one, but lack some of the main components. The taste is different, but it's good. And of course you can it's easier to admit to a lot of dietary or cultural restrictions with such products. There is an interesting product on the market. It's type of a seasoning. So technically cyclodextrin is added as a component of a seasoning salt. Here you can see the products. It's a salt, pepper, and chili. And in this case, it's specifically empty cyclodextrin is added with the intention what we discussed before, so to prevent the absorption of fat. So you enjoy the food, the cyclodextrin is tasteless and odorless, so even if you used it during the procedure, you wouldn't be able to taste if it's there in the food, but it supports the digestion, and less fat is absorbed, which can be good for your body. So that's the idea of this product. This is again a nice example. So in one product, how many different cyclodextrins can be used. So you can see that, okay, cyclodextrins can be used to create a foam, I said, as an emulsifier to reduce cholesterol. It could be also used to reduce the dose of certain components or improve the effect of certain components, like caffeine or different kinds of fatty acids that are contained in the product, or it can be used as a masking of bitterness, which for me would destroy the coffee, but for some it may help. So all in all, using cyclodextrins in foods has a tremendous number of examples, and we haven't touched how they can be used in beverages to add vitamins in different types of chewing gums and sports drinks and so on. So I really encourage you to think about it. And one additional very interesting stuff that I really love, there is a very short cookbook with cyclodextrins, so 10 recipes that you can use with cyclodextrins. It's available online. It's very funny. So, third big topic, cosmetics. This is one of the biggest applications globally of cyclodextrins. Of course, when we read the articles, we mostly read about all the pharma applications and science done there. But if we look at marketed products, here you can see on the right. So, okay, numbers are way past the 200s, and probably that's even an underestimation of what's actually available there in the cosmetic field. Any kind of cosmetic, really, you'll see any kind of cosmetic will contain cyclodextrins and can contain cyclodextrins, and not just small brands, really big brands, all the perfumes, the deodorants, creams, whatever. A wide majority of the biggest brands on the globe contain cyclodextrin as components in the cosmetic field. And the cyclodextrins here, unlike with the nutraceuticals and foods, where, as a reminder, we used alpha, beta, and gamma cyclodextrins, here would be mostly, not always, but mostly hydroxypropyl beta. So alpha, beta, and gamma cyclodextrin, we mentioned, are on the GRAS list, so there is a regulatory limitation for foods. What we also have to stress is that they're more, so they're cheaper than the derivative cyclodextrins. These are chemically modified versions of cyclodextrin. It's a hydroxypropylated beta cyclodextrin, a methylated beta cyclodextrin. And this chemical modification, of course, comes with a cost. So these derivatives are somewhat more expensive. Also, this comes with advantages. So from a functional perspective, these derivatives are much better than the native cyclodextrins. Their solubilizing power, their stabilizing power is not comparable to, okay, it's comparable, but it's orders of magnitudes better in most cases than that of the native cyclodextrins. So from a cost-efficient perspective, in many cases, these are better than the other alternatives if the application can, of course, afford a more expensive component. And that's always an economic reason here. The other advantage is that in some cases, it's important that they are technically unlimitedly soluble in water. So you can create a honey out of these cyclodextrins. While with the native cyclodextrins, there is a cap for solubilization. So why are they used in cosmetics? Stabilizers of certain components as emulsifiers and solubilizers, and improving the bioavailability. For cosmetic applications, and I'm not sure this is stressed in the slides, but uh, many, of course, of the cosmetic applications means a topical application. So you spray it on the surface of the skin, you apply the cream there, and so on. So when cyclodextrins are interacting with the skin, they can also interact with the components of the skin cells. So the surface of the skin, immobilizing cholesterol and fatty acid, loosening up membranes, and they can not only improve the bioavailability via increasing the solubility, they can actually act as permeation enhancers with many cosmetics that you use. So again, summarizing mostly the applications: solubilizing of certain components, stabilizing protection from light or oxygen of the components, so you can have a longer shelf life of these products. Cyclodextrins can often change the viscosity of the formulations for the better, or they can just be used as additives of the process to improve the formation of the emulsion, their stability of the suspension, and so on, or even just help to bring in compatible compounds to the same container. For cosmetics, there are some very specific applications. So you can encapsulate fragrances into the cavity of the cyclodextrins, and depending on the application, this can be exploited as a controlled release of the fragrance. So, of course, the component here would be originally very volatile and evaporate very quickly. If you put it into the cavity of the cyclodextrin, the release will be much slower, especially if it's a solid or a semi-solid formulation, or if it's a high concentration. So usually the release from the cyclodextrin cavity happens on a trigger, which is dominantly dilution, so contact with water. So it's a very typical and very strong example that, okay, you can create a powder of a fragrance encapsulated in the cyclodextrin, which wouldn't have any smell at all, or almost no smell at all. And you just drop a pinch of water into the formulation, and boom, the scent would be released. And well, you can imagine this can be used in shower gels and soaps and stuff like that, or of course perfumes. They can also mask the odor. Okay, taste masking is not as important in cosmetics, but odor masking is certainly there, and there are products on the market with this. And they can also alleviate skin irritation in some cases with encapsulating the irritating components. So, odor masking, I'm quite sure that most of you know this product. It's not available in Hungary, so in Hungarians wouldn't know it, but otherwise people would. So it's a deodorizing home care product, technically where empty cyclodextrins are also included to capture bad odor molecules from the air and deodorize them. And it's something that's well, super fashionable and efficient. By the way, it's a Procter & Gamble product, and Procter & Gamble has a huge number of patents out there on different applications of cyclodextrins in the industry. So using cyclodextrins to encapsulate fragrances, this is just a few examples. I already explained how they work, just to show you that it's actually there in a lot of products to have a longer scent, slower release of the fragrances. It's part of a really huge number of perfumes. As I promised, okay, encapsulating vitamins, retinoids are a very typical example. And of course, if you just look at the structure, you can see that they are really ideal molecules for cyclodextrin encapsulation. Here in this case, of course, it's more chemical stabilization, which is the purpose apart from bioavailability. The good thing with cyclodextrins is these happen simultaneously. So if you have a nice complex formed with a cyclodextrin, here you can see the schematic figure, then the solubilization and the chemical stabilization typically happens simultaneously. So you don't have to use different components for the different effects. There is another approach for stabilizing and delivering retinol, which is more innovative, I would say. So you can also use cyclodextrins to conjugate them and have like a prodrug-like of effect, because okay, you can use also the cyclodextrin here as a vehicle, and then the cleavage of the active ingredient would ensure the slower release in this case, and whereas the conjugate itself, due to the cyclodextrin, would inherently have a higher uh, stability and solubility. I promised some vitamins, just to bring a few examples. There are products with vitamin E as well on the market. You can see that you can achieve a very high content of the vitamin using the cyclodextrin technology. Another remarkable example for the stabilizing effect is the ferulic acid. I would just like to draw your attention to this part. So this first one is the cyclodextrin formulated version of the compounds, and the other ones are different vehicles, and you can see that this is technically a complete stability compared to the others, where within the scope of a few weeks, remarkable degradation occurs. And again, I told that, okay, resveratrol is not just only there in the dietary field. Obviously, it can be used here as well. The particularity is that, okay, I mentioned that in the cosmetics, you can also use derivative cyclodextrins, and this is what actually done, because while you can deliver resveratrol in nutraceutics with the help of cyclodextrins, when you want to create a real good complex, it's a derivative cyclodextrin here, the hydroxypropyl beta cyclodextrin, that you would use to have a really good formulation. Just a few other examples from a different area, shampoos. So here, cyclodextrins are again used for the very same purposes as emulsifiers, or to improve the absorption of certain oil components, and so on. So technically, I'm not repeating myself, just showing you the versatility of the product. One particular example that worth mentioning, especially due to recent events, is the product of Noble Panacea. So it's like a luxury cosmetic, which was developed based on the idea of Sir Fraser Stoddart, uh, who is a Nobel laureate, recently passed away with a huge contribution to psychodextrin science. And based on his idea, meta-organic frameworks of cyclodextrin, so technically cyclodextrin networks stabilized with metal ions were used as drug delivery vehicles or delivery vehicles of certain type of cosmetics. And based on this technology, they developed a wide range of products. So it's a different type of delivery system. It's not a single cyclodextrin, but a network of cyclodextrins that are used for this purpose. It's super fancy and efficient, and part of his legacy. So again, to summarize, even in the field of cosmetics, you can see that the applications are vast based on the exact, and that's the beauty here, that based on the exact mechanism of action, the very same, it can solubilize, stabilize, mask some properties. You can see how many different products and huge ranges of products and applications can be developed. So in the last part, we're not really focusing on a specific industry, but I'm bringing you just examples of applications from here and there, rather to show you that creativity can bring to the exact same or very similar concept a lot of added value. So paintings. What kind of cyclodextrin complexes can you put into paintings? You can put into paintings fragrances and have a controlled release of those fragrances. In certain areas, you can put insect repellents into paintings and have them released gradually, or you can include Okay, I'm not trying to pronounce this word because, okay, so against mold, technically compounds against mold, you can also put or against mildew, you can put into the paintings of, which is of course very common in bathrooms and stuff like that. Based on cyclodextrin complexes, it's very easy and straightforward to do. Some agricultural applications. I'm not repeating the basics here. Many of the pesticides, the insecticides that are used in agriculture are hydrophobic compounds, and those can be encapsulated into cyclodextrins. Those can be stabilized with cyclodextrins. Those can be delivered with higher bioavailability based on what we talked about today. This is trivial and it can be done, and it is done. A little bit beyond that, what else could you do? So this one is about providing bees with feeds that have higher vitamin and nutrition contents. This patent application, which is very beautiful, and of course it's very important to improve the well-being of bees. This is something that you can do, and cyclodextrins in general are often components of animal feeds to improve their nutrition in the agriculture. So you cannot just think about what kind of chemicals we spray on the plants, what we feed the animals with, the similar aspects of the food that we described why is good for humans. Similarly, they can be applied to animals as well. Or cyclodextrins can be used to encapsulate carotenoids, and when given to the feed, they can be used to change the color of the flesh of certain type of animals, which is very fascinating and fancy, I think. So now some of the examples I bring, I hope will be surprising and crazy. So trash bags with cyclodextrins. Here the idea was to encapsulate menthol into the cavity of the cyclodextrin and incorporate it into the foil of the trash bag. And the advantage is, of course, that it will have a controlled release of the mint, which is, of course, for instance, for once masking the odor of the trash, which is already good. But mint is a natural repellent of raccoons. So the second advantage is that it will not be torn apart by different kind of animals while waiting on the street to get carried away. Cyclodextrins are often used in the textile industry, and of course, based on the similar concept, like what we've shown with the painting, you can add compounds, for instance, fragrance compounds, into the texture of the fabrics. And there are some household products on the market that are used during laundry with a similar effect. So to add the better taste, better scent to the clothes during the washing. Here, it's a different concept. So there were several approaches during COVID to incorporate empty cyclodextrins into the texture of the masks to have a chemical barrier. So the mask itself is, of course, a physical barrier, but cyclodextrins in these times were shown to have an antiviral effect on their own. And this effect was can be exploited if it's incorporated into the mask itself. So technically it's a combined effect, the physical and the chemical barrier. And different types of cyclodextrins were used for this purpose, both monomers and cyclodextrin polymers. There has been a lot of publicity of cyclodextrins, how they can be used in the energy industry. And one very fancy example was the creation of or the preparation of lithium batteries to boost the capacity and the longevity of these systems. Of course, I'm not really deep into electrochemicals, so the mechanism of action is even a bit complicated for me, but there are a lot of papers and patents emerging in this field. There are quite a few products in dentistry and oral hygiene using cyclodextrins, different types of toothpaste, mouthwashes, fillings, cements, and stuff like that. with various applications. So I'm not going into detail. The concept is usually very similar or the same as with other products. It's just a different industry and again a different application. So space industry and space chemistry, this is a bit different in application. So cyclodextrins are chiral molecules, and they can distinguish between DNA and telomeres. So which means that from an analytical perspective, they can distinguish fairly easily between compounds of high similarity. And on the Mars and several extraterrestrial explorations, you know that there are these robots that gather samples that with the intention to look for traces of extinct life. And usually when they do this kind of analytics, they are looking for amino acids because it's hypothesized that these are the building blocks of any kind of complex living system. And usually cyclodextrins are used in the analytical tools of such equipments for the separation of different components of high similarity. So on a lot of Mars missions, cyclodextrins are also used as analytical tools. Environmental applications, I'll bring you two of these. The first one is more, how to say, it's a more moonshot project, and the other one is reality. So this one is to capture carbon dioxide from the air. I've already mentioned that you can encapsulate gases into the cavity of cyclodextrins. It's not easy, but it's doable. Here in this particular article, the authors is the specific cyclodextrin. So here you can see that this is not one of the common ones that we talked about, but it's something that has a high specificity towards carbon dioxide. And it was shown that technically it can extract carbon dioxide from the air, which could be potentially, who knows, a strategy in the future to reduce the climate, the effects of the climate changes and the greenhouse effect. A very big application, but I only have one slide about it. So advanced materials with cyclodextrins. Cyclodextrins are used in a lot of different kind of advanced materials, coatings, car paints, 3D printed materials, medical devices, and so on, as the building blocks of these systems. And this is a patent about 3D printed medical devices. Here, a very specific type of cyclodextrin is used. It's called rotaxane or polyrotaxane. So how you can imagine this molecule is that you can imagine a necklace where the pearls are cyclodextrins, and of course the stoppers wouldn't let them go, but they can thread and roll freely on the necklace, and that provides a unique harmony of flexibility as well as strength. So these are often used in self-healing materials and stuff like that, a lot of different applications, and it's a very fancy new use of cyclodextrins. And I think my last example is again a kind of environmental application, which I said that, okay, it's not as moonshot, or maybe it was a moonshot in the beginning, but these guys showed that, okay, dreams can also come true. So the goal was to develop a cyclodextrin polymer. So now we are not just talking about one cyclodextrins, but cross-linked cyclodextrins to remove certain components of water. And their initial target was drinking water and removing of PAFAS from this drinking water. So they developed a completely new cyclodextrin polymer and started creating filters that contain this polymer, so that, okay, you can just install this filter, and this is commercially available, so you can check their website. You can just install this filter to the kitchen, and as the water runs through, the They also have these kind of tests. As the water runs through, it absorbs all the PAFAS along with some other chemicals from water. So cyclodextrin polymers were shown to have a very good efficiency in removing drug residues, chemicals, and stuff like that from the water. So it's a novel type of filter that provides very pure drinking water. Now they're going to the next stage and try to implement the same system into wastewater treatment plants and bigger industrial applications. So technically, this was the bouquet of cyclodextrin applications that I collected for you for today. I'll try to show you as many examples as possible. I hope that it was not too boring because, of course, the mechanism of action I understand is very similar in all kinds of application. But for me, it's very interesting to see that based on the very same concept, how many different products can be created and imagined. So again, dietary supplements, foods, and cosmetics dominate this word, but as you can see, it's only the imagination is the obstacle to create new applications in any kind of industry. So thanks for your attention. And now I'll look into the chat box to see. I'll stop sharing and I'll look into the chat box to see if any of you raised any questions that I try to answer.